To introduce the second speaker of our panel. It is an intoxicating pleasure and creating pleasure. Introduce to you our the second speaker today, Danilo Marino. Received a PhD in Letterature Comparate and Langue, Literature et Société du Monde from both the Università degli Studi di Napoli Orientale and the Institut National de Langue et Civilisation Orientale of Paris, with a thesis entitled Raconter le Hashish dans l'époque Mamlūk, étude et édition critique partielle du Rāḥat al-arwāḥ fi Hashīsh wal-Rāḥ de Badr al-Dīn Abū Tuqā al Badrī. Based in Cairo, he is currently working on the complete edition of Al Badri's Rāḥat al-arwāḥ. He will publish in the special issue of Annales islamologiques a contribution on, quote, raconter l'ivresse et l'époque Mamlūk, les mangeurs de Hashīsh comme motif littéraire.
So thank you for the presentation. Thank you for inviting me to this really amazing conference. So now, after having some food, so this is the right moment to relax and talk about Hashīsh. So I will read my presentation. So it seems that from the 6th, 12th century on, Hashīsh as an intoxicating agent was considered a real social problem, so much that several attempts had been made to create a legal frame forbidding any recreational use of the herb. As far as no explicit condemnation was found in the Quran, Hadith, or other traditional legal books, for the 7th, 13th century scholar al-Aqbari, there was no proof in considering Hashish illicit. That's why he wrote a book, which is the only treatise, as far as we know, presumably in price of hemp, that it unfortunately lost, but was extensively quoted by others in subsequent sources, including Al Badrī's Rāḥat, al-arwāḥ fi Hashish wa Rāḥat. According to al-Aqbari, Hashish cannot be considered as intoxicant because it is eaten and not drunk. Just to remember you, in the Mamlūk period we used to eat Hashish, not to smoke it. Because the habit of smoking Hashish, it's parallel to the appearance of tobacco, which is 16th century, more or less. So, and we have several recipes how to prepare peels of Hashish. Either you pulverized the dried leaves of Hashish and then you mix it with honey or sugar, or either you soak the green leaves in water for 1 week, more or less, and then you mix with honey and you create this paste, and then you dry it in the sun, and then you eat it. Now, so Al-Aqbari, we're talking about Al-Aqbari. So, as far as Hashish is not ritually unclean, neither is a fatal poison, there is no evidence in the legal food prescriptions forbidding this herb. Al-Aqbari's critics, instead, especially Al-Qastellani, will strongly point out that as far as the effects of hemp are concerned, it is essentially muskir, because, as for wine, it blurs humans' rational faculties. Therefore, it should be applied to the well-known hadith, كل مسكر خمر وكل خمر حرام. One of the most fierce Hashish detractors was certainly Ibn Taymiyyah, whose attacks against the drug are worth mentioning here. In his well-known Fatawa, Ibn Taymiyyah claims that Hashish must be listed among the repulsive substances, because like wine, that is an unclean liquid such as urine, Hashish should be considered an unclean solid and be compared to filth. Hashish is for Ibn Taymiyyah particularly dangerous because, I quote, opens the door of imagination, creating illusions that could be, in his view, none other than corrupted images. Similarly, for Al Badrī, the pleasure Hashish eaters find in the drug is a short-living, deceptive and illusory pleasure, which he calls lazzat wahmiyya. What is clear from this discussion is that Hashish consumption was clearly considered as a means of evading the reality and seek refuge in the realm of imagination and dreams. This is an important point that we will discuss later on in this communication. But let's now present briefly our source. Rāḥat al-arwāḥ في الحشيش والراḥ, the pleasure of the souls in Hashish and wine, of Tuqā al Badrī, who died in 894, 1488, is an anthology of poems and anecdotes inspired by Hashish and wine. It is divided in two sections. The first is about wine, the second about Hashish. The Hashish section is divided in 7 chapters. In this communication, I will focus on the 5th chapter that opens with the following observation. I quote, "It is said that Hashish consumer eats, together with Hashish, the lightest foods and the finest sweets. Then he will sit on the most comfortable place, and surrounded by his friends, he talks about real and imaginary things. After that, he will start to tell stories, one after another, and let his mind wander about sweets and food. And he thinks that all these images are true, whereas are dreams." This introduction highlights two important elements of our discussion. First, one of the effects of Hashish is stimulating appetite, or even a strong craving, especially for sweets. As we can find this idea in the verses unlikely attributed to Abu Nuwas, I quote, "If the Creator asked to grant me a wish, I would ask him honestly, I want every morning as subsistence a decent donation, a handful of hashish, a rattle of meat and bread, as well as sex with a willing boy." The second element is that Hashish descriptions is that food descriptions under Hashish effect give the impression of reality while they are basically images, illusions or dreams. In fact, as we said, Hashish has the power to misread the reality, blurring the boundaries between consciousness and dreaming. This tension between reality and dreams is particularly evident in the first anecdote of this 5th chapter, where Al Badrī quotes a story that already included in the 9th, 15th century Ibn Sūdūn's Nuzhat and nufūs muḍḥik ḥašīš. And this is the anecdote. A rich Hashish eater named Ibn Siyaj al-Qayrawani one day consumed a large dose of hashish. Then he fell asleep, and suddenly he heard a voice telling him to give to his brothers Hashishin a part of his richness, because his death was approaching. So when he woke up, he ordered to buy with all his money the most expensive ingredients and to cook the most delicious sweets. Then he went to the Genina, a well-known place in Cairo frequented by the hashish eaters, and gave them all sorts of these pastries. After that, he came back to his place, ate another dose of hashish, and slept. Suddenly, the same voice addressed to him again, directing his attention to a splendid castle where all the architectural elements were made of sweets and pastries. The whole palace was made of curdled milk. The columns were of almond paste and sugar. The roof was fried mushabbak. The windows were made of mumashek. Walls too were made of pastries. Bricks of qahiriya, which is a typical Egyptian sweet, alternate with qata'if bricks, plastered with nufūs, and the tapestry was made of honey fibers. Inside the palace, a basin made of qatra filled with jullab, has a floor made of sabuni, which is another Egyptian pastry. Corners were of marzipan, and fishes were and peeled fishes. And fishes were peeled bananas in this basin. All the furnitures were made of sugar or sugar cane. Around the castle, a river of honey flowed between banana trees, and small tent annexes were made of kinafa. When Ibn Siyaj al-Qayrawani asked the mysterious voice about the owner of this castle, he told him that it was his reward for having fed the Hashish eaters. He was so pleased to hear that he composed the following poem. I quote, "Maybe who has collected money has wasted his life. Have you? Death is turning around. Feed instead with qata'if, the Hashish eaters. Then go to sleep, and like me, you will drink sweets." But as soon as he woke up, the image of this fabulous castle has disappeared, of course. He discovered instead his money box, completely empty. And he became immediately insane because it seems he was a very, very stingy person. A close reading of this story suggests some elements of discussion. First, we can state that Al-Qayrawani belongs to the Mamlūk elite because meat, but especially in this case sweets, were considered luxury food in Mamlūk period. In fact, there was a debate among the religious scholars on the issue of halawa. Ascetics interpreted halawa as comestibles that were naturally sweet, such as dates, honey, and fruits. Because according to the hadith, the Prophet liked halawa, and as the Prophet was depicted as a moderate man, then he could not have consumed luxury food. Consequently, some ascetics during the Mamlūk period designed halawa solely to the next world. In fact, one would certainly note that these dreams are similar to the description of the paradise, of course, in the Islamic tradition. In the Quran, Al-Jannah is a garden with pleasant dwellings for chosen, pavilions where huris are kept, lofty gardens, fountain and stream of living water, wine, milk and honey, fruits and meat. The fruits and meat they wish will be served in priceless vessels by immortal youth, because this is the reward for their deeds. Indeed, Al-Qayrawani's second dream is a reward for having fed the Hashish eaters. However, this is of course a parody of the Quranic recompense. First, because Al-Qayrawani's vision is a dream of abundance and extravagance, knowing no limits. Second, because it is a detailed and odd list of architectural elements made by all sorts of confectionaries. A parodical and humorous inversion between eatable and uneatable, and more important, it is a kind of edible paradise. Finally, it is an embellished and refurbished paradise, satisfying the drug-created craving only for sweets. Moreover, Ibn Sina, for instance, discussing paradise states that in its deepest reality, the life of paradise will be that of intelligible substances. That means that the Quranic descriptions will be experienced in the strict sense, not as sensual delights, but as pleasures of imagination, thanks to the heavenly bodies. And it is precisely this last point, the pleasures of imagination, that makes clear that the Hashish vision is a subsidiary of paradise, because it combines the usual paradisiacal accoutrements with the most bizarre dreams of earthly abundance. Now, according to Islamic oneirocriticism, dreams are full of symbols that would most often be presented as predictions and warnings. According to An-Nabulusi, dreams originate either in the aspirations of the self or in the desire, ambition, or just confusion. Dreaming of food is particularly ambivalent, and it depends whether it's raw or cooked, and how and whether it's salty or sweet, whether it's accompanied with other food, whether the dreamer eats it or only looks at it, whether the dreamer is fasting, praying, and so on. Bread, for example, is a symbol of money. Yes, it's a symbol of money. While dreaming of raw meat is a bad omen, unless it is stuffed, fried, grilled, or boiled. And in that case, meat means money, benefit, or fertility. Salt is a very bad omen, meaning a sad or tragic event, whereas fruits, especially dates, sugar, honey-made sweets, and other confectionaries are in general considered symbols of joy, luck, money, and pleasure. Dreaming of a castle, finally, is a bad omen. If the dreamer is dissolute, the castle means anxiety and a symbol of prison. But if this castle is one of the castles of the paradise, then it means that the dreamer should repent because soon he will pass away. So, the hashish eater's dream would be seen as a corrupted image, a short-lived vision of the pleasures of the paradise, because it turns to be an illusion of sensual delights. No reward, not even this edible reward, will be granted to him for what he thought to be a good deed, feeding the hashish eaters, whereas he will be punished for his stinginess and not for his drug habit, which is an important point. Now, this anecdote reminds us the gingerbread house of Hansel and Gretel. Everybody knows the story. However, we should say that the house made of confectionaries as a literary motif is already found in a number of poems and popular tales from the late medieval Europe, at least from the 14th century on. It is the well-known motif of the Land of Cockaigne, a paradise on earth where work was forbidden, food and drink appeared spontaneously, and one has just to open his mouth and all this delicious food jumped inside it. But also rain was made of pancakes and pies. The weather was stable, always spring. There were communal possessions, no arguing or animosity, free sex with ever willing partners, a fountain of youth, beautiful clothes, and, of course, edible architecture. All the houses there are roofed with delicious pancakes. The walls are made of pancakes with bacon, the beams of suckling pigs, the doors and windows of sugar cakes. Around every house stands a strong fence woven of fried liverwurst, meatwurst, or other kinds of sausages. The fountains spout wine, and all manner of sweet drinks and meat pies grow on trees. Some rivers are made of milk, and white bread constantly falls into their currents. Others are of water, with boiled, roasted, or grilled fish swimming in it. Roasted chicken, geese, pigeons fly over the country, and pigs already roasted walk around with a knife stuck in their back. As Hermann Plage states, I quote, "Glorifying gluttony belongs to a time of all-pervasive fears of death by starvation. In constantly repeated stories about bizarre experiences of hunger, so there was a need for escape, consolation, and compensation in these, and these were provided by such places as Cockaigne." This observation seems to be relevant for Middle Eastern and North African Mamlūk period as well. Historical sources like Al-Maqrizi, for instance, have constantly stressed the economic and social impact associated with the periods of drought. When, I quote, "the Nile stopped increasing for several days, grain prices rose and merchants stopped selling it. People's war increased. They were called upon to stop committing what Allah forbade, and instead to commit themselves to virtue. End of quote. The dramatic narration of Nile drought is common to other Mamlūk historians, such as Ibn Tadrivirdi and Ibn Iyas, where we can find powerful apocalyptic depicting scenes of plundering, robbery, and collective flight, typical of social chaos. But when the Nile water flowed again, flooding the fields and entering the canals, festivals were celebrated along the river gardens, where people indulged in food, wine, hashish, while dancing and singing. So I will go just to the conclusion. In conclusion, let me summarize the two major points related to hashish and food. First of all, khayal. As we have seen, hashish was considered a way of access to the realm of imagination. If from one side it was meant to produce images in terms of inspiration and literary creativity, from the other side the drug was able to enclose some subconscious and hidden wishes or desire, otherwise difficult to reach during a normal state of consciousness. This was the most dangerous issue related to hashish according to Ibn Taymiyyah. Escaping the reality, dismissing the real of rationality and self-control. In that case, the mental images provoked by hashish consumption seem very much close to the dreaming activity, in the way that both reveal and more or less intentionally repressed or frustrated desire due to problematic situation marked by deprivation or denial. Food and sweets in particular are one of the major cravings together with sexuality produced by hashish. So it is not astonishing if we find a very long digression on food in the Rāḥat and arwāḥ and Hashish wa Rāḥat. All sorts of luxury food are used to build literary representation of edible architectures that, as we have seen, are found as a literary motif in European texts, such as the Land of Cockaigne. According to Herman Plage, in the late European texts, confectionery architectures, along with an ever plentiful and self-replenished supply of food, are a clear imaginary response to periods of privation and famine, or to escaping from the compulsory monotony of the Northern European alimentary habits. But also, as far as meat and sweets are concerned, prestigious comestibles, both in medieval Middle Eastern and Western civilization, were only affordable by the upper classes. So, this luxury foodstuff could only be consumed by the lower classes in paradise or in dreams. Dreams seen as alternative and inverted reality, substitutes of an unequal society. If this social interpretation would be certainly true for both Al Badrī's and Ibn Sūdūn's texts, from a literary point of view, however, the hyperbolic and humorous description in the Rāḥat and the Nuzhat were also meant to magnify the greediness and strong appetite of the hashish eater. Thank you.